You've probably seen a lot about how amazing homesteading is, especially with the push towards self-sufficiency. But what if I told you that some of those things are misleading? Many YouTubers romanticize the lifestyle, painting a picture of peaceful mornings on a farm, endless homegrown food, and no limits to freedom. But what they often leave out are the tough realities, the things that you don't really see on camera. In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 reasons why I think you might want to rethink homesteading this year, so you can go into it with your eyes wide open. Let's dive in.
Lewis works.
Homesteading requires tasks that may be very time-consuming. There are so many different tasks in homesteading that you have to do every single day. Your animals have to be fed, your plants have to be taken care of, so they have to be watered, fertilized, pruned, and whatever else you want to do with your plants. That's not even including all of the time that you have to go out and you have to pick up the fruit and the vegetables off your plants, bring them inside, wash them, clean them. And if you have chickens, you have to collect your eggs every day as well. You have to go out, you've got to feed your chickens, you've got to take care of them, you've got to raise them. If your animals get sick, you've got to find ways to treat them and care for them so they don't die. So there's many different tasks that you have to do that takes so much time up that you normally would have if you didn't have animals. So because I'm on this homesteading journey, I have less personal time in my life. You know, you have to take care of these animals, you have to feed the animals, you have to take care of the garden, you have to tend to the garden. And I just don't have that much personal time like I used to anymore. And that not only affects me, it also affects my family as well. There's many times where they have to help and they have to pitch in and do chores, and that takes away their personal time as well. So because homesteading is so demanding and so taxing, I try to find ways to, I don't want to say cut corners, but I try to find ways to make hacks, right? So in my garden, I use wood chips. Wood chips is something that I literally live by in my garden. It cuts down on watering, it cuts down on fertilization, it cuts down on weeds. There's so many benefits that wood chips have had in my garden that has decreased the amount of time that I've had to use, or decreased the amount of time that I've had to spend doing work inside of my garden. Also, one thing that I've used recently is I've tried to find ways to cut time on the amount of time that's spent on the chicken. So I bought a deer feeder for my chickens, and that automatically feeds them their food. Also, I have a big giant water container in my chicken coop, and I only fill it up maybe once a month. And the last thing that I did for my chickens is I bought an automatic chicken coop door. And that way they can go in and out of the door without us having to open it. So they can go out of the chicken coop into their run area, and we don't have to open up and close for them. So the only thing we really need to deal with our chickens is just cleaning up the chicken coop and collecting eggs. There's also one thing I wanted to add to our whole chicken situation. We have rain barrels, and one plan that I have for those rain barrels is to put poultry nipples on those rain barrels. And that way, instead of me having to fill up that water container that I have for the chickens, it will automatically fill up every time it rains. So that's another way that I'm gonna try to save time with the many tasks that we have on our homestead. And if any of you watching, if you guys have any ideas about how to save time on the homestead, just drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm always about saving time and saving energy and effort. So if you have any hacks that have really worked for you, just let me know and just send me a message on the comments below. The daily time commitment is only part of the equation. Let's talk about the physical work that's involved that can be just as demanding, if not more. I'm gonna tell you guys, the work is physically demanding, and it can be an obstacle that's very hard for some people to overcome. Homesteading is hard work, and it's a commitment to do more work than what the average American is willing to do. And just think about this for a moment. You know, in America, we go to the store, we shop, we get our eggs, we get our produce, we get our meat, we get all the things that we need from the store. And there's really not much physical labor that's involved with it, right? You go in your car, you go to the grocery store, you push the cart, and the food is readily available to you. There's not much work and there's not much struggle to get food in America. Now, homesteading is the exact opposite. There's so much work that you have to do on the front end before you actually get any fruit from your labor, right? You think about chickens, you get chicks from maybe from Tractor Supply or Rural King, and you've got to raise them. And it takes months before you even get eggs. Some of you may be interested in growing meat chickens. And depending on what chicken you have, it may take close to 2 months, or it may take 4 or 5 months. It just all depends on what you want to do with this homesteading journey. Even with things like gardening, right? You have to prepare the soil and plant your seeds. And after you plant your seeds, you have to water your garden. And it can take months before you even get to see any vegetables or fruits produced. If you're interested in planting something like trees or blackberries or raspberries, you may not see fruit in the first year or two. Blackberries, you'll probably see them maybe in the first year or two, but it's not going to be a lot. For fruit trees, it normally takes about 2 to 3 years before you even get to even enjoy the fruits of your labor. And even then, it might not even be a lot. So before you even get any kind of reward from your homestead, it's going to take days upon days, weeks upon weeks, and even months. And depending on what you're doing, it may take a few years. So patience is the game when it comes to this. And while we're talking about the subject of work, let's talk about all the fencing I've done. I have fencing for my sheep, I have fencing for my chickens, and I have fences for my garden. And it serves two purposes. One purpose is so my animals can stay in one place, but another purpose is so other animals can't get in. So around our area, we have deer, we have coyotes, we have foxes, we've got all kinds of animals that you can think of. Animals that love eating chickens, animals that love eating the fruits and the vegetables that you grow in your garden. And even with those fences that I have, sometimes those animals tend to slip in anyway. Sometimes the foxes are able to get our chickens anyway. And sometimes rabbits still get into our garden anyway. So even after you've built all of these parameters to keep animals out and to keep your animals in, sometimes it just doesn't work like that. There's plenty of times where our sheep have gotten out or our chickens have gotten out. And hey, that's a part of homesteading. And the thing about fencing is it's such a time-consuming, labor-intensive process that starts even before you put the first post in the ground. First, you've got to go and you've got to buy all of the material you need. You've got to buy the wood, you've got to buy the fencing, all the hardware that goes with it. Then when you're doing your fencing, you've got to get all of your measuring. You want to make sure your measuring is correct. And you've got to make sure that your fence is aligned straight. So what I do is I get 2 pieces of wood and I get a string. And that is kind of a way that I am able to make sure that the fencing is somewhat straight. You've got to dig holes that your wood posts are going to go in. Then you've got to pour in concrete. Then after all of that, then you've got to actually put the fencing on, which is a totally difficult process by itself. And of course, every fence has to have a door. So you have to build a door so you can go in and out the fence. And on top of that, all of these things is weather dependent. So if the weather is not good, if it rains or if your ground is saturated in rain, you have to wait. Right now, I'm wanting to finish some sheep fencing and the ground is still kind of saturated with water and I'm unable to do the fencing until the ground actually dries up. And speaking of physical labor, if you have a lot of trees like I do on my property, if it storms or if it rains really bad, oftentimes we have trees and limbs falling down, and that creates work for me because I just can't let those trees sit there. So I've got to cut them up and then I've got to take them to our fire pit and burn them. If I had an unlimited amount of money, I probably would have someone come and cut it up for me. But unfortunately, I found out that that was very expensive to do. And so I'll just cut trees myself so we can save some money. While physical labor can take a toll on your body, it's not the only investment you'll make. Homesteading can put a strain on your wallet if you let it. So you got to think, you've got your upfront costs. You have to buy land, you have to have property, and you got to buy your animals and things like that. But then you kind of have your ongoing expenses such as animal feed, and things break down and you have to repair those things. So there's a lot of cost that can be involved when it comes to homesteading. So of course, like I mentioned before, you have to buy feed for your animals. So you have to take care of your animals. Your animals have to eat. There's minerals and other things you may have to buy besides feed. And then there's tools, right? You have to buy tools to fix things. And what I've done is I've bought tools a little bit at a time, but depending on how big your homestead is, you may need to buy a tractor or something like that. And tractors are very expensive. We are fortunate that we don't need tractors. We just have 2 lawnmowers, and we also just have different kind of tools that I use. And I have found out that Harbor Freight has been really a good place to shop for tools. But also you need to consider, when you have a lawnmower, sometimes your lawnmower is going to break. And there's going to be things that you can repair, and there's going to be things that you're going to have to hire somebody to fix because you're not going to know how to do everything. And I will say that there are ways to mitigate expenses when it comes to homesteading, so don't let this stop you. However, you're going to have some kind of money to have a homestead. You're going to have some kind of money. And after all the time and money and effort that you've invested, you're going to wonder, is there any time for me to take a break? The answer to that question is yes, but it's going to take some very careful planning. Caring for animals and crops, to get time off, it takes a little bit of planning and little creativity to make it happen. But if you're smart about it, it can happen. This is why I think it's important to find ways to automate your homestead in different ways that you can, so you can have time off when you want to. So this is where things like automatic feeders and waterers kind of come into play. So with our chickens, we have that automatic door, we've got the automatic feeder, deer feeder, and then we have the automatic waterer as well. So with those three things in place, our chickens are taken care of. We don't have to worry about anything. With the garden, we don't really have to worry about the garden. We can leave for a week and come back, and our garden will still be thriving because we have wood chips. Those wood chips do a great job of capturing water when the rain comes down, and we very rarely have to water because of the wood chips. So the garden is such an easy thing to take care of because the wood chips, in a sense, has automated that watering for us. Now, if you have something like dogs or cats, that may be a little bit more tricky. With dogs, you may have to have somebody to come over and maybe check on your dogs and make sure that they're all right. Cats are a little bit easier to take care of because you can just buy a gravity feeder and the cat will be fine. You leave your cat outside, they're going to be totally fine. Really, the biggest thing for us to kind of be a little bit more concerned about is our dog and our sheep. And even with the sheep, if you have enough grass that's growing and you've got water for them, they're very easy to take care of. So even with all of the creative solutions that you have to have time off and to have a vacation, there's one thing you can't control, which is nature. Environmental factors bring their own set of unique challenges. So unpredictable weather can cause a lot of damage to your crops and do damage and harm to your animals. So I'll give you one good example. A couple months ago, we had quite a bit of trees that fell down, and one of those trees fell on our sheep pen, and it also fell on our fencing. And so because this tree had fell on top of the sheep pen, it actually blocked one of the doors. So we weren't able to open up the sheep pen in the area where the sheep actually go and graze in. So that took a couple of days to get that tree off. And it may have been a little bit quicker if we got a tree cutting company to do it. But after my wife found out that the estimate to cut one tree was $1,000, I said, you know what, the sheep will stay in for a couple of days and we'll go ahead and I'll cut that myself. So another environmental factor that you may have to consider, depending on where you live at, may be poor soil quality. And to build up good soil, it's going to take a little bit more than just a year. It may take you a few years to build up the soil in the way that you want to do. So, if you have chickens, if you have other kind of animals like sheep and goat, cows, things like that, save up that manure and then spread that over your garden, the area that you're going to be planting the garden. And then also use those wood chips. I would suggest doing those two things to help build your soil and to make it a lot more fertile. One big thing that we always deal with in our homestead is wildlife and pests. So predators and pests can be a huge challenge when it comes to gardening and when it comes to raising animals. As mentioned before, we've had foxes eat our chickens. I've had to deal with snakes inside of our chicken coop. We had one snake that kept trying to eat the chicken eggs. Lately, rodents have been a huge issue. I've seen a lot of mice and a lot of rats inside of our chicken coop and inside of our sheep pen. 2-3 months ago, I had to remove 5 dead rats outside of my sheep pen, which had drowned inside of their water container. And with gardening, we have those same bugs that come back every year. We used to be able to grow squash, and that has been a huge headache over the last few years with squash bug and vine borers. And we've really came to a place that I typically don't even try to grow squash anymore because it's just so time consuming dealing with the pests that love eating squash. And every year when we grow our tomatoes and our peppers, we have to deal with this big giant caterpillar called a horned tomato worm. And if you don't put them in check, I promise you, they will ravage through all your tomatoes and peppers pretty quickly. And because of these pests that we sometimes have to deal with, we end up getting some serious crop failures some years. And so some vegetables may not do good one year that they did the year before because maybe we're dealing with a specific pest more this year than we did last year. So that's a whole nother thing you got to deal with too when it comes to plants. Sometimes it's hard to grow certain plants because of the pests that you have to deal with. So since we've been homesteading, we've had 3 sheep that have passed. We have 1 goat that has passed away. We had 2 guineas that I had to take out myself because they kept leaving the yard and going into our neighbor's yard and across the street. I was very nervous that they was going to cause an accident, along with plenty of chickens that have been eaten. Man, let me tell you, everything loves chickens. Everything loves chickens. So because we have chickens, many different predators find their way into our homestead, and we've got to find ways to deal with that as well. And to complicate things even further, you're going to have knowledge gaps. You're going to have a lack of experience. And there's a lot of different skills you need when it comes to homesteading. You're going to have to know how to garden. You got to know how to fix things. You got to know how to take care of animals. You have to know how to build things. There's so many skills and so many things that you have to learn and that you continue learning. There's so many different learning curves that I've had to go through and I'm currently going through right now. So there's this idea of when it comes to homesteading that you're ever learning. You're always learning new things. You have to become a constant student. And so that's another thing that may dissuade some people. Some people don't like learning. And if you don't like learning, I'm gonna tell you this, homesteading is not for you. But if you want to learn, and if you want to grow, and you want to expand the way that you think about the world and nature and things like that, homesteading is the right place for you. Now, I want to be clear. None of this doesn't mean that you shouldn't homestead, but you want to be aware of what you're getting into before you start. Homesteading can be incredibly rewarding, but it's not a perfect life, and it's definitely not a getaway from all of the problems that you have in your life. So if you go into it with the right expectations, the right mindset, and a willingness to push past problems and issues, homesteading is good. It's going to be a good thing for you. Homesteading can be an absolutely amazing journey. You just need to be prepared for the reality so you can thrive instead of just surviving. I hope this video has given you a clearer picture of what homesteading really is. If you're still up for the challenge, you got this. See you in the next video. If you like what you saw today, subscribe and tap that notification bell. Until next time, stay diligent.
Want more? Watch one of these videos next. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated.